Hi, my name is Connor Murray, and I am 16 years old and currently attending St. Ignatius as a junior. And this is my mom, Keely Murray. She grew up in Andover and attended Phillips Academy, and then she went over to the University of Pennsylvania to row. And today she works as an event manager at Hartman Studios. So I was going to ask you a couple questions about 9/11 and what were some experiences about that.
Sure.
So my first question is, where were you and what were you doing at, right when you heard about the news?
So I had graduated in 2000 from Penn. I moved back up to Boston, and that spring, so of 2001, I moved down to West Virginia, which is where I started kind of event planning at the Greenbrier Resort. And I remember I was in the office. We'd have to get in at 8 a.m. I was a kind of a junior person. And we would always have the news on in the office. I worked with a lot of marketing and sales teams, and we'd either have kind of like a money market show on. And all of a sudden, we saw this live coverage coming from New York City. Having grown up in New England, having gone to Andover and Penn, I had quite a few friends that had graduated my year, a couple of years ahead of me, that were working in New York City. So it was definitely, there was kind of that rush of knowing a few people that were in those towers, but also not even understanding what I was watching.
Yeah.
I was only 22 years old, and it was kind of unfathomable.
Yeah.
So,
So were there any specific sounds or images or whatnot that still stick with you to this day?
yeah, I mean, there was chaos in the streets. You remember watching, the news didn't pick it up, I think, until the first tower was hit, and you saw the helicopters, and then there was the second helicopter, or the second airplane rather, and it was again completely unfathomable. And when it imploded, and you could see people, and you'll see pictures if you look back at that time, covered in dust and debris. You saw people running from the scene, and then those running to all of the service, fire, police, Good Samaritans, trying to help. The towers were over 100 floors high, so at the time it was the largest buildings in New York City.
Yeah.
So
So when did you realize that your friends were in those towers? Did you know or did you just find out after?
So one of my girlfriends from Andover, she was a year ahead of me. So she graduated in 95. I graduated in 96. She was my swim captain, and like you with baseball and just any kind of sports teams that you're on, you really do create these bonds with your classmates and your peers that are above you.
100%.
So, yeah. And so we didn't have, Facebook had just started. So back in that time, you had cell phones that were also kind of new age in 98 or 99, I remember at Penn. So I would write letters to Stacy. She was at Yale, and then she'd graduated, and she said she was working at Cantor Fitzgerald, which was this, I think it was a hedge fund of sorts. It was super prestigious. It was on the top floor of one of the towers, if I recall. And so right away, my thoughts went to her. It was really scary.
So how did you try to reach out to her? Did you call her, or did you kind of just know that?
I tried to call and text.
Yeah.
And then Dad, he had moved. This was before we got married and even engaged, but we were still dating at the time. He had moved out to San Francisco that June. Okay. So I started calling him when this was going on, because again, because we went to college together, we had a lot of mutual friends. He was 2 years ahead of me, so he also knew people that would have been in those towers working.
Yeah.
But of course, it was East Coast versus West Coast.
Yeah,
so
so-
while it's happening at 8:30 here,
It's
the West
5:30 in the morning. So,
yeah. So unless you're working market hours out here, a lot of people were sleeping.
Yeah.
And so I remember calling your dad
He's-
2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
And he finally was like, "Oh, what's going on?"
Yeah.
And I remember sobbing. And again, you kind of felt like this like shell shock of
Yeah, like what's going on?
yeah. It just didn't. It seemed very surreal.
Yeah. That was my next question. Like, what was going on through your head at that like moment? Were you just like shocked? Or...
Yeah, there's shock. There's panic.
Mm-hmm.
There's confusion. Even if you didn't work in those towers, there were people. There were a lot of buildings in that vicinity and area. That was a popular place to go. You know, I had a friend. It wasn't just on 9/11. It wasn't just New York. It was also the Pentagon, and my cousin and her husband Jim and Leah work in CIA, right, and Air Force Intelligence, and Leah would often have to go from Langley to the Pentagon for briefings, and so there was panic there. And then Pennsylvania, there was, they thankfully that crew was able to get the passengers rather were able to fight,
to overthrow it. And,
I had another friend, and you kind of start to, as everybody's talking about these stories, because it's not even 6 degrees of separation, it's like 2. My friend Aaron Cooper, he was supposed to be on a plane from Boston to LA, and he had been sick the night before, but he also would have perished in that plane had he gotten on. So it's kind of like by the grace of God.
Saved his life. So like, how did 9/11 like impact through you? Like, how did it impact like how the world you saw it like in 2001?
So I very vividly remember.
Did it shift your perspective or anything? Yeah.
I very vividly remember in high school taking a class on the Middle East politics with Mr. Drench, and we talked about kind of jihad and what that meant, and our involvement in the Gulf War and what sort of impacts we could potentially see at home. And so it did feel like a foreshadowing, but again, it definitely, I kind of felt, I've used the word catapulted a lot, but catapulted back to that history class, and living that in real time was really scary. And then what you experienced after was some martial law, some people that looked like they were of Middle Eastern descent being put in prisons and unfairly and unjustly. Correct. And so, there's that like moment of panic. Everybody thinks they're doing what's best, but
like kind of what happened like Pearl Harbor, where they were like
exactly.
So how's your perception of like this day like changed over like the years to come? Like, has it changed your view in like 2025 or like?
No, I think it's still a day of remembrance for people that we've lost. I was telling you, Auntie Jennifer, her sister was engaged to Brandon, who also passed. So there's a lot of people that lives were touched that day, and so even 25 years later, it still feels, or 24 years later, it still feels kind of raw.
And then last question, like, what do I need to know that I haven't asked you?
What do you need to know?
Kind of what should I like take on from this?
There's a lot of conspiracy theories around the 9/11 that like the news that we get nowadays different than even back then. It was not like the news cycles that we have that were 24/7 and people were trying to sell newspapers. I think you need to know that you're like the service men and women that spent months and months pulling out bodies, taking care of rubble, to the detriment of their lives. Many of those firemen got cancer from breathing all of that in.
Yeah,
but
all that.
people don't think twice about that. They like Jesuits. They, their service to others.
Yeah.
And so I think was an important lesson, that you keep yourself safe, or you think you are, but you're helping others. And just like how precious time is. And I think it's also, making sure that you tell your friends and your family how much you appreciate and love them, because one day you could be hanging out and the next day
you could.
You're gonna be saying goodbye. So that's important.
Well, thank you for this time. I
Thank you,
appreciate
Connor.
it.
Appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you.